Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwan, and today we're going to be talking about Necromunda. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K lore videos every single day, and if you have any suggestions, please comment down below. But with that said, let's get into 40 Facts on Necromunda. Necromunda is a hive world in the Imperium of Man Segmentum Solar and a major producer of munitions, lasguns, autoguns, shotguns, and bolters, among other weapons. The planet also levies huge number of troops for the Imperial Guard, most notably the regiments of the Necromundan Spiders, as well as the other crucial supplies. To learn of Necromunda's history, we must know of the two wars of Arrhenius. Arrhenius Prime was first settled over 15,000 Terran years ago, during the Dark Age of technology, as a mining and manufacturing colony. The worlds of Arrhenius continuity were a series of planets close to the Sol system, which had maintained links to one another due to the existence of a series of ancient warp gates of unknown origin. Ruled by a caste of tech nobility from the worlds of Arrhenius Prime at the heart of the network of warp gates, the continuity was a kingdom of iron and hungering industry. Contact between the Imperium and this pocket of humanity occurred by accident. A lost squadron of warships returning from the Genhenial persecution was forced from the warp into one of the continuity's peripheral systems. Before they could jump back into the warp, the squadron was surrounded, boarded, and overwhelmed by cybernetic grafted warriors. The cries of the squadron's astropath echoed through the immaterium, and far away the Imperium heard and turned its gaze upon the worlds of Arrhenius. An envoy fleet was sent, and was allowed to return bearing the continuity's answer to the Emperor's demand of fealty. The tech nobility flatly refused to bow to the Emperor, but instead invited him to join their empire as a tributary. For its response, the Imperium turned to the Imperial 5th Space Marine Legion. It fell to Hashin Yonad, commander of the 39th Household Chapter of Inuit, to persecute the war. A superlative warrior, Yonad was reckoned by many to be one of the Imperium's greatest strategists. Called upon many times as a fleet commander and siege master, he planned meticulously and executed his plan with brutal swiftness. Marshalling his fleet at Talaran, thousands of warships carrying over 20,000 Imperial fists, alongside millions of troops of the Imperial Army and the Mechanicum, launched their assault upon the unsuspecting system of the Arrhenius. Within 2 solar months, the continuity was reduced to a single core world of Arrhenius Prime. Their empire cut from around them, the tech nobility in their iron towers looked to the night sky and saw the darkness stolen by the light of the Imperial fleet. They surrendered then, and the sun rose the next day on the set of yet another stellar empire brought to Imperial compliance. But even as the Imperium moved to claim their prize, the worlds of Arrhenius continuity were beset by an unknown menace. A few accounts speak of a darkness deeper than the void, of living lightning and flame-wreathed chrome. 6 systems burned, their stars ignited to terrible life, before crumbling to cold ember. Commander Yonad made the terrible decision to defend only some of the worlds, otherwise they would all be lost. As the unknown enemy appeared in system after system, they met the Imperial Fists. As more of the enemy came, the Imperial Fists denoted warheads they had attached to each warp gate. Without their gates, the unknown enemy simply vanished. Their advance had been halted on Arrhenius Prime when its gates exploded. All but one of the star systems of the continuity died, and at the cost of 1,000 Imperial Fists and billions of humans, Arrhenius Prime survived, but barely. The death of the Warp Gate and the cluster of Xenos craft which had penetrated the Imperial Fist's line had changed the shape of the planet. Its surface had been ravaged by unnatural fire. Its world city cracked and rendered to dust and ash, from which the shattered roots of its great towers rose like broken teeth. Looking upon the charred remains taken from the pyre, the Imperium gave the world a new name, one that echoed with a world brought to the threshold of death, but one that still lived. Necromunda, they called it. The ensuing millennia have not changed its basic purpose very much. Necromunda is still a world of mines, factories, refineries, and processing plants. The planet is a vast powerhouse of industry, making thousands and thousands of different items for use throughout the nearby imperial planetary systems of the Segmentum Solar. Nothing which can contribute to the planet's output has been left untouched, from the tops of the highest mountains to the depths of the oceans. The wealth of Necromunda has been extracted. Mountains have been reduced to rubble for the ore they contain. Oceans have been turned into little more than chemical sludge ponds by the constant industrial pollution. The once fertile plains of the world have disappeared under huge urban developments of imposing housing and factories, forming new ranges of man-made urban mountains, every bit as tall as the longest flattened natural topographical features. These huge towering urban arcology complexes are known as hive cities, or simply as hives, and their individuals, peak or tower, are called city spires. A close group of urban hives is known as a hive cluster. Between the hives, deserts of industrial ash cover the surface of the planet with a mobile, corrosive skin. Over this desert lies a cloud layer of airborne pollution, so that the great spires of the city hives rise from the drifting mists of tainted vapor, like islands appearing out of the ashen sea. The hives and hive clusters are connected through the ash wastes by so-called ash trains, long trains of transport cars outfitted with reinforced balloon wheels that can travel between the wastes on a system of tracks, delivering passengers and goods. These trains are often attacked by the nomadic tribes of mutants called ash raiders, who have somehow adapted to life in the poisonous ash wastes. Despite being reduced to such a hellish environment state, Necromunda is still a valuable world to the Imperium. Although little of Necromunda's original resources remain, the waste heaps of previous generations have become a new source of richness. Necromunda lives on the accumulated wastes of its past. Its people have learned to scavenge, reclaim, and recycle everything in order to squeeze a living from their exhausted world. Necromunda's population has increased well beyond the planetary's capacity to support it. As a consequence, it is wholly reliant on synthetic and imported foods. Each hive has its own recycling plant, which converts previously used organic matter and waste into synthetic food. Real food is imported from off-planet, but it is an expensive luxury which only the most wealthy and prestigious Necromundans from the world's aristocracy can afford. There are probably more people now on Necromunda than there ever lived in the entire history of Terra, up until the end of the 20th century, in the second millennium. In an attempted imperial census of Trazior Hive, 4,000 years ago in the 37th millennium, revealed an estimated population of 1 billion in the upper habitation levels alone. No further attempt has been made to count Necromunda's population in Trazior, or any other of the several thousand hives on the planet, though the world's population must be over 100 billion people. The society of Necromundan is reasonably typical of a larger hive world. No attempt is made to enforce centralized administration upon the entire population. Indeed, such a thing would prove impossible on a world where most people remain unrecorded by any authority. Instead, a kind of feudal system has developed by which individual people owe loyalty to others, who in their return owe loyalty to others, increasing more powerful members of the hierarchy. Among the more stable elements of the population, these loyalties, owed on a family basis, and closely related families all support each other under the leadership of the most powerful member of their family group. This form of urban feudalism tends to be self-regulating. Weaker clans naturally seek the protection of the more powerful neighbors, whose power base then expands until it reaches the limit whereby its numbers and resources are simply too few to allow it to expand any further. Where rival clans meet, it is inevitable that their power will be tested in combat, the ability of a clan to exert its power being the only true measure of its influence. The endless feud between the warrior gangs are never ending. The governor and ruler of Necromunda is Imperial Commander Lord Gorontius Helmward. His ancestors are known to have reigned for the past 7,000 years at least, records of government before that time having long since disappeared. Even the archives of the Adeptus Administrorum and the bureaucracy of the Imperium are remarkably silent on the history of Necromunda during the early days of the Imperium. Lord Helmward occupies the very top of Necromundan feudal hierarchy. The society he rules over is divided into many factions, which continually repeat and cooperate with each other, giving rise to endless change in the feudal hierarchy. Lord Helmar is completely unconcerned with the activities of lesser power brokers. He deals directly with the most powerful factions. If a major player in the power game proves weak or treacherous, it is a simple matter of Helmar to withdraw his support. The very rumor that he might be about to do this is enough to encourage a feudal inferior's enemies to turn against him and betray him. The Adeptus Terra leaves Lord Helmar to govern his domain as he pleases, as it leaves all Imperial commanders free to administrate their worlds. The Imperial Commander forms a link in the feudal chain which extends throughout the galaxy to the heart of the Adeptus Terra. So long as Helmar fulfills his feudal obligation to the Imperium, his position remains secure. Helmar's main obligation to the Imperium is to provide a tax which takes the form of a percentage of all goods Necromunda produces. As the entire production capacity of the world is given over to providing manufactured goods for the Imperium, the tax is taken as a straight discount on the revenue earned. So long as Necromunda continues to meet these responsibilities, and so long as its production capacity is sufficiently high, the Imperium remains quite satisfied. Hive worlds like Necromunda provide the Imperium with another useful resource, namely its people. Necromunda produces generation of tough youth, with a strong sense of self-reliance. They are highly valued as recruits for the Imperial Guard and even for some of the Space Marine chapters. Providing recruits in vast numbers is another of Lord Helmar's feudal obligations. Recruitment brings officials from the Imperium to Necromunda to inspect and in some cases conduct recruiting drives amongst the fighting gangs. Helmar himself is obligated to provide troops from his personal guard, usually a whole regiment at a time. Because the planet supplies so many troops for the Imperial Guard, the name of Necromunda is known throughout the galaxy, even by people who know nothing about the planet itself. Over the centuries, Necromundan regiments have fought with distinction in the Imperial Guard, and have earned the fearsome reputation on many battlefronts. Another important obligation is that Lord Helmar successfully control the number of dangerous mutants. These psykers, or witches, are a mutation which is becoming increasingly common on all worlds of the Imperium. On most worlds they can be dealt with fairly easily, but on a hive world like Necromunda, with its vast population, the matter is much more difficult. Psykers are very dangerous indeed, probably more so than even they realize. Although some are able to control their powers and use them for their benefit of society, the majority are unable to control their powers properly, with disastrous results. Some become hosts to demonic powers from the Immaterium, while others attract psychically sensitive aliens or psychic diseases, which can then leap into the minds of ordinary people. If psykers were to go unchecked throughout the Imperium, human society would soon collapse. Indeed, this is one of the reasons why the Emperor clings so tenaciously to life, as only he understands the dangers of possession and psychic destruction. Necromunda's capital is Hive Primus, also known as Palatine. The Hive's noble houses are in constant Byzantine power struggles to gain control of the Hive, and thus of the entire planet. The 7 most important houses are the noble houses, whose domain extends throughout the spire, the part of the Hive that stretches above the cloud top layer. The noble houses are the controllers of the Hive's commerce. They trade far and wide throughout the Imperium, and with other Hives on Necromunda. The noble houses compete against each other for wealth and political power, always seeking to further their own interests at the expense of their rivals. Intrigue and fear of assassination dominates the lives of their ruling families. The most powerful noble house is the imperial or ruling house of Helmar. Its domain is the very top part of the spire, the most desirable territory in the whole Hive. Lord Helmar, the leader of the house, controls the entire planet. He represents the mighty Adeptus Terra of Earth, and the governing body of the Imperium of Man. To the greater universe, Lord Helmar is Necromunda, and the planet is his to rule as he pleases. The patriarchs and merchant families of the noble houses vie for his attention, and are eager to perform whatever favors are necessary to secure landing and shipping rights, trading licenses, and tax concessions. Even while they curry Lord Helmar's favor, the noble houses scheme behind his back, hoping that one day House Helmar will be brought down and a new imperial house will inherit his domain. The 7 noble houses of Necromunda are House Helmar, House Catalyst, House Tai, House Olentai, House Grime, House Ranlo, and House Co-Iron. These houses usually don't play a direct part in most of the fighting and exploration of the Underhive. Noble House Catalyst is one of the 6 noble houses of the Spire. Once a large and proud prosperous house, preeminent among all elite noble houses of Necromunda, second only to House Helmar itself. It had large stakes in most hives on the planet. Then, over 2,000 years ago, civil war broke out in what is still remembered as the most vicious conflict in the archived histories of the noble houses. What triggered the war, or even why the factions disagreed, is not known. But for over 100 years, House Catalyst was torn apart by assassinations and embroiled in open warfare between house factions and bloodlines in internal power struggles for the house's wealth. The ancestors of what is now House Catalyst emerged as the victorious faction, exiling their defeated relatives into the Ash Wastes in what was supposed to be a death sentence, never to return to the protection of the Hives. Some outcasts survive in the wastelands beyond the safety of the Hives, and their resiliency underestimated by the victors. Though now polluted, the air was then still breathable, and they thrived in the desert, becoming the nomad gangs that wander the toxic wastes, doomed by their forefathers and still living with the shame that their ancestors cast them out from the safety of the Hive. The double-bladed knife was a ritual weapon traditionally carried by members of House Catalyst, dating back to the house's prominence. Since the exile, it has become a common weapon of the Ash Waste nomads and the Outhivers, and a symbol of the nomad struggles. The double blade allows a fighter to parry with it like a sword, even though it is just a knife. While House Catalyst sends out its young men and women in Spire teams to prove themselves ready to rule like the other noble houses, they are not sent into the Underhive. Instead, they are sent to the Ash Wastes to hunt the nomads descended from their ancestors' enemies in what is more a traditional ritual than genuine revenge. In practice, nomads, shanty dwellers, and even guilder caravans are all hunted as vermin who hate and fear the spires in return. Another notable house is Noble House Ulentai. Noble House Ulentai's territory includes a palace with a needle-thin tower on the outside of the spire, famously the former home of Mad Donna, the daughter of old Sylvanus Ulentai, current house patriarch. Part of the complex trading relationship between noble and Hive City houses, the Ulti Contract is a lucrative deal, whereby the Hive City houses compete to supply the core requirements to House Ulti exclusively, while the house itself competes with the other noble houses to buy the other houses' produced goods. Many centuries ago, House Delac supplied the contract, But in a bid to usurp them, House Orlok bribed dozens of Underhive gangs to sabotage Delac mining and supply operations, destroying fuel lines to a Delac guild factory, and so utterly disgracing them in the eyes of House Ulti, who were quick to award the contract to Orloks instead. But while the Ulti's owned many of the resources for the contract, simply leasing them to the operators of various trade contracts to harvest, the Delacs refused to turn them over to House Orlok, seizing them as their own and blockading the supply lines, transport routes, and mine entrances around the contract zone, in retaliation, escalating the feud. The Orloks had no problem producing iron and other minerals and metals, simply using their existing pits, forges, and factories, but they were forced to take more direct action to acquire the many fuels needed to manufacture las cells, which were scarce while the Delac blockade was in place. Lord Ominous Orlok II sent a dozen or more Orlok gangs, led by his youngest son, Kagil, in person to seize Drypos Falls and the valuable fuel production facilities that were there. Outnumbered and completely taken aback by this blatant display of hostility, the Delacs realized no victory was possible and planted charges instead, setting the chemical rivers that fed Drypos ablaze and blasting the falls canyon into pieces, killing dozens of Orloks and the many Delacs too slow to escape. Such open warfare drew the attention of the noble houses to the mounting feud, and Lord Arius Helmar was forced to intervene. Openly, he ruled that Delac's actions were unacceptable, voiding all contracts with them, but in private, he used it as an opportunity to make the well-known Delac-Helmar connection less obvious, offering them handsome rewards as his eyes and ears in Hive Primus, on the condition that they kept the arrangement secret. In a gesture to the Delacs, Helmar accused the Orloks of failing to keep their gang in check, and despite his protest, forced Lord Ominous to outlaw and exile his son, who had been among only a handful of survivors of the Drypos, threatening the loss of the Ulti Contract if he did not comply. From that day forward, the two houses have been bitter enemies, their hatred remaining unabated, and they have taken every opportunity to sabotage, slander, and discredit each other. The violent rivalry remains despite the sensation of open warfare. Like the sons and daughters of most noble houses, young Ultis are sent in spire teams, or if preferred individually, to the Underhive to prove themselves tough and resourceful, to take on their place among the ruling families. The Ultis have an exclusive hunting club, which one solo Orus hopes to be allowed to join after completing his vow of 10 kills, 10 times the usual requirement, and returning beyond the wall. Noble House Coiron is one of the 6 noble houses of the Spire. Coiron has a powerful female line, and in contrast to the other patriarchal noble houses, is led by a series of matriarchs descended from the maternal line. Far from the most powerful noble house, it maintains its position in the Spire, from the ownership of several ramshacked Hive City Manufactura districts and a few choice off-world charters. Possibly as a result, many well-known Coirons are famous outside the house only for their political marriages to other houses, and it is fitting that a gambling game is named after it, Coiron 6 card. Nearly 10 years ago, House Delac lost the lucrative Coiron contract, severed all contact with the noble house on the sundering of their ancient deal, and effectively stranding their agent, Kralin Delac, who had taken on an oath to serve the noble house, while the Delac Coiron contract was in effect. In the Hives, every manufacturing process, industry, and service is the concern of one house or another. The pressures of competition for limited resources, even such basics as good food, air, and water, means that every house must sometimes resort to armed force to secure its survival. Every house, and groups of related families within each house, have their own territories or concessions, often carved out and defended by their own gangs of young house members. In this way, forests have been replaced by jungles of metal and concrete, and society is ordered along these tribal lines. For many ordinary Necromundans, running with a gang comes as part of a life cycle. Young members of the gang are expected to play their part in defending the gang territory and upholding the honor of their relative house. Youths in their early teens are initiated into the gang by various rites of passage. From then until their mid-20s, they fight for the gang in the same way that young warriors would fight for their tribe in a primitive pharaoh world society. After several years with the gang, a gang member gains the respect and status of his family and other house members, and gains the right to found his own family and take part in the house's business. The struggle for supremacy between houses is ceaseless and often violent. House gangs fight each other openly. Gang leaders are assassinated and kidnapped, or most commonly, a gang's resource and territory is destroyed in endless raids. Lord Helmar and the noble houses do little to interfere. They simply wait and do business with the winners. Neither Helmar nor his officials concern themselves with inter-house rivalries, as long as they fulfill their quota of goods and deliver them on time. Lord Helmar extracts tolls on all businesses through off-world shipping and handling charges, recruits the best gangs into the Planetary Defense Force, and leaves the Hives to manage as best they can. It is an arrangement that suits everyone. The cooperation between the houses and Lord Helmar is an accepted part of life. It operates at many levels, with gangs recruited into the Planetary Defense Force given semi-official status as venerators and custodians, or secretly used for Helmar's hidden dealings. Young house members usually fall between the ages of early teens and mid-20s. Most of the population of Necromunda belongs to a house, and then they form gangs. A typical house can include hundreds of such gangs. The workshops, factories, and assorted living areas of the families in the house are the territories of the local house gang. Other houses, gangs, and strangers will be challenged if they violate the gang's territory without permission or payment of tribute. Youths are initiated into the gang by various initiation rites. Some must prove themselves worthy by acts of reckless bravery, such as scragging an enemy, which means cutting off an ear or finger as a trophy. Others must endure ritual scarification without flinching. Most gang members receive ritual scars or tattoos of some kind. After a time running with the gang, juvies will have gained enough respect and status to found their own families and take up family businesses. Gangs of young noble house members protect the house territory and other members of their house as they go about their work. These gangs also make it their business to uphold house honor, which will often lead to long-standing feuds between rival clans. Gangs with a good reputation may be hired by other houses, noble houses, or Lord Helmar's officials for various tasks. Exceptional house members may be recruited into the Planetary Defense Force, Imperial Guard, or even the Adeptus Astartes. The most common type of gangs on Necromunda are made up of the members of 6 houses of the Hive City, namely House Orlok, House Goliath, House Escher, House Van Sar, House Delac, House Cawdor, although there are other smaller houses. House Orlok is known as the House of Iron because its foundation lies upon deep ferrous slag pits. The Hivers mine these pits for the debris of ancient times and extract enough pure metal from the refuse to serve their industries. Over the centuries, extensive mining on the slags have caused some lower domes to collapse. In the past, this led to hivequakes and the destruction of several overlaying domes. For many centuries, the house has fulfilled the Ulti Contract, a lucrative deal by which one house supplies the core requirements of the Ulti noble house. Previously, the contract was supplied by House Delac, but the Orloks usurped the position by bribing Underhive gang raiders to destroy fuel lines into a Delac guild factory. Since then, the two houses have taken every opportunity to discredit each other. 5 years ago, Lord Hagen Orlok was assassinated by the Delax, and relations between the houses have never been the same. The domain of House Goliath is situated unfavorably within Hive City and occupies some of the deepest and harshest areas. By way of compensation, the Goliaths are tough and persistent by inclination. They consider the hivers of other houses to be soft and slack. In truth, all hivers are naturally robust, being inert to the toxins which they accept unquestioningly as part of a normal life. The Goliaths, however, take a stubborn pride in their ability to endure hardship. The other houses see Goliaths as barbaric and unpredictable. Goliath institutions, such as the Fighting Pits and the Feast of the Fallen, do nothing to dispel these impressions of a violent people. Size and strength are seen as the measure of a man. Their style of dress emphasizes a preoccupation with physique, featuring weighty chains and spiked metal bracers. House Escher is perhaps the most strikingly different of all the houses of Necromunda. Like all the houses, it is controlled by a ruling family, and its political life and institutions are dominated by close relatives or families in service. However, unlike other houses, which have reasonably balanced populations, that of the Escher is made up almost entirely of women. The few men are shriveled and imbecile, perhaps as a result of a genetic flaw within the house's bloodline. Whatever the reason, they play no part in the normal affairs of the Escher. Escher society has long since developed to cope with its uniquely imbalanced population, so that it is no longer perceived as a disadvantage. The Eschers have a reputation for arrogance and are said to look down and pity all males. They are particularly dismissive of the Goliaths as simple and brutish. The two houses are old enemies, and skirmishes along their borders are common. House Van Saar is renowned for the quality of its technical products. The technology is no more advanced than that of anyone else, progress being almost non-existent throughout the Imperium, but the house's manufacturing processes are precise, and its finished material are of the highest quality. The noble houses pay a premium for Van Saar's goods, and as a result, the house is probably the most wealthy in the Hive City. The Van Saar are reputed to be a serious-minded and humorless people, with a deeply ingrained sense of order. Like all the houses of Hive City, they have a style of dress which marks them out. In the case of the Van Saar, this takes the form of a tight-fitting bodysuit designed to protect and sustain the wearer in the hive environment. Semi-permeable membranes in the suits reduce the loss of body moisture, while various spots in the material change color to warn the wearer of airborne toxins and reduce oxygen levels. House Delac benefits from a special understanding with the Imperial House of Helmar, providing not just material, but also information to the rulers of Necromunda. Delac spies are said to operate throughout the hive, observing the activities of other houses. It is rumored that some of the ruling family members of the houses, and even some noble houses, are in the pay of the Delac. Other houses are suspicious of the Delacs. Their appearance perpetuates their reputation for double dealings in espionage. They traditionally wear trench coats in which they can easily conceal weapons and other large items. Most are very pale and bald-headed. Their whispering voices are thin and eerie. Many wear dark visors or implanted filter screens to protect their sensitive eyes, an intolerance of light being a common Delac weakness. Although the entire hive is eerily dim, the territory of the House Delac is particularly dark and shadowy, as it benefits a people whose motives and methods are shrouded in mystery. House Kaldor is the stronghold of the Cult of the Redemption, whose prophets foretell of universal destruction. Although the cult has its adherents throughout the hive, in House Kaldor it has attained the status of an official religion. For this reason, the house is also known as the House of Redemption. The Kaldor attitude to other houses is strongly colored by their beliefs. Amongst other things, this forbids them to show their faces in public, so Kaldor can be recognized by their elaborate masks. The design of their masks are often quite bizarre or disturbing. The redemption demands a strict code of conduct, and those who break the rules are driven away and become outcasts. Hivers who do not follow the redemption are worthless infidels. Needless to say, the relationship between House Kaldor and other houses is strained. It is often supposed that the Kaldor actively support redemptionist outlaws in other houses. There are many gangs that battle in the Underhive of Necromunda. The Brat gangs are made up of the children of the noble houses that reside above the wall and rule Hive Primus. Unlike the first and most important offsprings, they will never be expected to prove themselves as spires in the cruel Underhive, and will never take positions of real importance in the ruling of Necromunda. Some become bitter and hateful at their older siblings. Some just accept the lack of responsibility and luxury, but there are those that have a different approach. Although the noble houses try to stop this from happening, groups of friends sometimes make a joint decision to sneak through the wall, usually bribing the guards and living a life of daring adventure in the Underhive. The Hivers call them brats, but only behind their backs, because they see the whole of the Underhive as a huge funhouse, and will think nothing of blowing anyone away who annoys them with the sophisticated weaponry that they bring with them. Also above the wall, there are no such things as slot, nuts, or wild snake, so they revel in the pleasures of trading posts, which they can afford in abundance. This makes them impulsive and maniacal at best of times, so you don't want to annoy a brat if you can possibly help it. The brats are always in the forefront of any new fashion or cult that sweeps through the upper levels of the hive. Young nobles are privileged, wealthy, inquisitive, rebellious, and open to wider influences than are available in the lower levels of the hive. Brat gangs sport fantastically elaborate costumes and hairstyles, and flaunt the conventions of the hive life as openly as possible. In the upper level hive layers, brats run together in packs, but they do limit their predations to their home territories. They frequently drop down the spires into the lower habs, where their wealth can be used to obtain any drug or weapon. Once in the lower habs, the brat gangs terrorize the techs and workers, safe in the knowledge that they can return to their upper levels whenever they want to. Brats are recruited from the unruly, discontent, and rebellious youth of the nobility. Their territory is the estates of the noble houses in the upper hab layers. Brats go in for bizarre tribal rituals, imitating those of the other hive gangs. Initiation rites, scars, tattoos, hairstyles, and extravagant, rather than practical clothing, characterize these gangs. Brats can be quite well armed due to their wealth and access to imports. Exotic weaponry is especially favored. Tec gangs and associations are more common than supposed. The techs often form collectives to protect themselves from exploitation by other groups. From passive protection and defense, such associations often mature into gangs that were as aggressive in their own fashion as any other in the hive. Tec gangs have a pool of skills, which means that they can often trade for materials from the factory level. They deal in drugs, chemicals, and weapons, trading these goods for interesting technological relics and rare raw materials scavenged from the Undercity. Tec gangs are not noted for crude ferociousness, but they are widely respected for their experience with weapons and equipment. And it is foolish indeed to cross the Tec gang without reason. Techs belong to clans, either forming a distinct group within a large house or forming separate tech houses. Techs form gangs to protect their businesses most importantly. Tec gangs protect the workshops, industrial plants, and associated living areas of the tech families that work there. Tec gang members undergo initiation rites, which might involve technological implants or advanced forms of tattooing. Techs have access to unusual and technologically advanced weaponry due to their skills and great bargaining power. Tec gangs are concerned with the protection of their territory and tech businesses from the predations of envious rivals. There are many who will resort to lawless means to obtain advanced technology. Tech gangs are often hired by Helmar noble houses and other houses for tasks which require their expert technical skills. And then there are pit slaves, which are criminals and captives who have been enslaved and are forced into hard labor or gladiatorial combat. They are usually forced to have cybernetic implants that is appropriate for the job they are doing. When slaves escape to revolt, they tend to become hired guns, or they form into tech gangs. Gangs of cannibalistic mutants who carve out small kingdoms in the Underhive with the use of scalies, plague zombies, ghouls, and giant rats, as well as normal scabies and mutant scabies. All scabies are mutants. The only real difference between the normal and mutant scabies is that the mutant scabies' mutations are often beneficial in some way. They often utilize only the most basic of weapons. Autoguns and shotguns can be considered the pinnacle of scabie weaponry. Due to their lack of effective armaments, they often rely on numbers and attrition to win battles. In an environment where life on the whole is cheap for a normal hive denizen, it is many times worse for any average scabie. In lean times, a particularly luckless scabie may find himself the main course for the rest of the gang, due to their cannibalistic nature. An enemy gang member that has been captured by a scabie gang may also share this grisly fate. And then there are the Ratskins. The Ratskin people have lived in the ruins of the Underhive for as long as time itself. The Ratskins regard the place as their ancestral home. They know almost nothing about the world that lies above their heads or beyond the hive. Ratskins have lived apart for so long that they have developed their own language, and only the few who visit Underhive settlements to trade bother to learn the common tongue of the hive. Ratskins possess senses uniquely adapted to the conditions of the Underhive. Their sight is incredibly keen, and it is commonly supposed that they can see in pitch darkness. A Ratskin can smell out tiny differences in air quality, and can track other hivers or hive creatures by scent. Their hearing is also finely attuned to the hive. The slightest sound tells them where others might be, whether a tunnel is safe, or if dangerous creatures are lurking nearby. Ratskins care nothing for the hive city, or the hivers that come from above. They do not understand the hivers' insane lust for scrap metal and glittering stones. Most of all, they are baffled by the foolish manner in which settlers eat toxic fungus, fall down holes, blunder into roof falls, and generally act in a senseless and dangerous fashion. Although outsiders puzzle and often anger them, the Ratskins are content to leave hivers alone so long as they leave the Ratskins in peace. Adventurous Ratskins trade with the hivers and sometimes hire themselves out as guides or trackers, but they are a self-sufficient and proud people who neither need nor want much from anyone. Ratskins know their way around the Underhive better than anyone else. They know about the main tunnels and small crawl holes. They know ways into and through Underhives, which the hivers are utterly ignorant of. They can find paths into domes, which remain undiscovered and buried to ordinary men. Ratskins move through the hive effortlessly and mysteriously, disappearing almost magically, appearing as if from nowhere. For the Ratskins, the Underhive is a living place, inhabited by sacred spirits. It is a place with which they feel a natural harmony, a place which is great and beautiful in their eyes. Ratskins respect the hive as a mighty god, generous in its bounty and merciless in its vengeance. In their eyes, the Underhivers often anger the hive by causing rockfalls or carving into tunnels with their clumsy excavations. Sometimes hivers go too far, trespassing into sacred places or poisoning the native pools. Ratskins live in small communities that are hidden from the settlers and explorers. They cultivate cane spores, which provide food as well as reed-like building material, and they hunt the rat herds that infest the hive. For the most part, they avoid the foolish intruders whose heathen ways often offend the spirits of the hive. Most settlers soon succumb to predators, toxic fungi, roof falls, or some other inherent danger, which all goes to show that the hive is intolerant of those who fail to show the spirits proper respect. Despite all of this, some ratskins hire out as guides or trackers, and a few become semi-civilized as a result of contact with Hivers. They can be found and hired in the larger settlements, such as the Dusk Falls, Glory Hole, and the Dead End Pass. There are few expeditions that would venture into unknown waste zones without the expert aid of a ratskin tracker. Sadly, some ratskins are attracted to the strange ways of the Hivers and acquire a taste for intoxicating, gambling, and riotous living. These troublesome individuals hang around the settlement until the inhabitants lose patience and throw them out into the wastes. Bands of ratskin renegades are a nuisance to settlers and their own kin, and have a well-deserved reputation for savagery. And those were 40 facts on Necromunda. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any suggestions on other topics of Warhammer 40K, please comment down below. More new content coming very soon, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. This is Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.